All right, guys, just want to welcome back to the Gridiron Gurus podcast. Today, me and Nick here are going to be looking at three things the San Francisco 49ers must do this offseason to get one step closer to getting back to the Super Bowl. Starting with number one, maybe a bit of a cop-out, Nick. We definitely could have picked something else. First topic of discussion is get healthy. I mean, obviously, this is quite notable, and this is an obvious one, right? But this team was just incredibly hampered by injuries all year long. I don't think anyone was sitting here making fun of San Francisco for getting, spacked by Seattle in the divisional round just because they had no bodies left. And this was a theme the entire season. It didn't get any better in the postseason. And George Kittle, torn Achilles in the wild card game. His replacement, Jake Tonjes, who had a very good season, hurt his foot and had to leave in the divisional contest. I mean, they just cannot catch a break. And Tom Brady said it best. This is a team whose bus was just an ambulance. That's what it looked like, quite frankly. And there's lots of other injuries we could have probably put on here. Christian McCaffrey wasn't 100% all season long. D. Winters was banged up towards the end of the year. But when you look at this offense, Nick, Brock Purdy missed a bunch of games. Ricky Pearsall as well couldn't consistently see the field. Fred Warner missed 11 contests. He had a bad injury. And this pass rush was just demolished. Nick Bosa only played the first 3 games of the year. Michael Williams was, their first round pick was expected to come in and make a difference. And he was playing some solid football before he also got a bad injury, suffering a torn ACL. They just could not catch a break. Even Tatum Bethune went down. I mean, the common theme here, Nick, is they would find a replacement, and that replacement would get hurt. And they're down to third, fourth string guys at some of these positions. And this is a lot of rehabbing. This is going to be a long off season for San Francisco. You're not sure if these guys are going to be healthy early, even for spring and summer camp. So, getting healthy is the number one objective for San Francisco this offseason.
It's certainly interesting that this team was able to, win as many games as they did to make the playoffs, go 12-5, and really put up a fight. They were in the fight to get, the one seed in the NFC near the end of the season, despite all these injuries. And it's really stunning when you look at it because this team was so banged up all year. They've been battling injuries galore, and we didn't really even mention it, or you didn't really mention it in your first part. I'll mention it here. Brock Purdy only started 9 games this year. He was banged up. Mac Jones was a solid holdover in between, going 5-3 when Jones was a starter for this team. Obviously, this team's a lot better when Brock Purdy is the one leading the way, but Mac Jones was able to hold over and certainly be a steady hand when necessary for this team. Christian McCaffrey had a phenomenal season despite being a little banged up here and there. He was still really good for this team. I think the biggest issue though was the health on the defense. Right, when you look at this defense, they were just unable to stay healthy all season long, and they had some of their bigger guys like Jair Brown, D. Winters, Bethune, some of these other guys get hurt throughout the season, and they were still able to produce a significant amount of tackles and be key players for this team. And that's certainly something important when you look at what they were able to do. It's clear that they have to get healthy in the offseason. Losing both their tight ends was certainly a problem. Kittle, what is he going to look like coming back from his torn Achilles? He is such a key part of that offense. Tonjes is a really solid backup who can certainly play the style they want to play. But I think if this team wants to go, compete for a Super Bowl, which is the expectation in Northern California, Kittle's got to be fully healthy next year. Pearsall's got to be healthy as well, and I think the defensive line, has to find a way to stay more consistent, stay healthy. And I don't exactly know how you do that, but I think you're gonna have to bring in some depth at wide receiver and some depth at defensive end. Certainly, with the way that this team has been banged up all year, again, continues to be impressive that this team was in the playoffs. It was a contention for the top seed in the NFC, despite all the injury concerns. They just could not stay healthy at all, and that really put this team in a tough position to make things happen when it mattered most. And it's not exactly surprising they got blown out by Seattle, who is just a more healthy, more clean team that is sort of in that good position. It's very sad to see because this is a very talented Niners team that just cannot seem to figure out, they cannot seem to get the pieces together to stay fully healthy.
Now, I'll move to topic number two. Another one's quite obvious. Moving on from Brandon Ayuk, John Lynch has went ahead and already said that he will not be returning with the 49ers. The discussion is how are they going to address this and what are they going to do to upgrade at the wide receiver position? When you look at his cap situation, Nick, this is a guy who signed a 4-year, $120 million contract extension after a 1,300-yard campaign in 2023. He tore an ACL and an MCL back in Week 7 of 2024. He didn't play at all in 2025 when he absolutely probably could have came back. The 49ers voided the guaranteed money in his contract. He did not file a grievance with the Players Association. He had some disputes with the coaching staff, I think, one time over attire that they're wearing at practice. He posted that video of him speeding past the stadium going 100 miles per hour. Just an individual that does not seem to care about football one bit, Nick, and it's very unfortunate because this is a talented player. But after he got paid, had a horrible season, only 374 yards in 7 games, no scores. Didn't want to return to the program last year, and even when the money was voided, he's like, I don't care. So I don't really know what you do with this. I don't know if he's going to have much trade value because is he going to show up to whoever he gets traded to? I think the value is likely on the lower side, and they're going to have to pay for most of this contract. $29 million dead cap hit if they release him today. Post June 1st, though, much better situation. 13.3 for this year be charged, and then next year a little bit bigger of a number, $21+ million for the 2027 dead cap. So the 49ers, this is just something they're going to have to eat, and they're well aware of it. I don't think they really care, Nick. They just want to be done with this problem. What are they going to do, though? Are they going to look to draft receivers in the first round? It's a very deep class. This is also a wide receiver group that has a handful of notable guys in free agency. It's not that deep, though. I don't know if you can really find a key contributor in free agency, but they're definitely going to have to reload at the wide receiver position. But again, the Niners do not care, Nick. This is just a cancer they want to be done with.
I think it's very clear the Niners have to do something at the wide receiver position. Christian McCaffrey was their top receiver this year with 925 yards receiving. That was, 200 more than Juwan Jennings, who was the next highest receiver, about 250 more than Juwan Jennings. So clearly that's an issue. And no disrespect to McCaffrey, he's a phenomenal back in the passing game, but you want to be able to target somebody. McCaffrey got the lion's share of targets, 102 this year receiving. That was more than Jennings or Kittle, who were in the 50s. So, I mean, again, he was getting so much attention and so many targets. And McCaffrey, I don't think you can necessarily rely on him to be your top asset in the passing game because he does have that injury issue. Obviously, wishing him well and hoping that it works out for him. But he's your top running back, and he's got to be the one that's got to carry the football in that regard as well. So you got to find a way to get him some help and kind of balance this out. Brandon Ayuk was phenomenal for this team when he was playing focused. Obviously, that 1,300 yards season in 23 was incredible. He had the 8 touchdowns the year before that and 1,000 yards in 2022. This has just been a complete mess with him with the video and off the field stuff. Him not filing agreements with the NFL Players Association makes me assume that he's kind of waving the white flag and saying that he wants out of this situation as well. I mean, I would try to trade him. I don't know what type of value you could get, but I think you'd rather get something than nothing. Maybe if you can find a way to even get a draft pick. I don't think that's possible. I don't know what you could get at this point, right? There just seems to be a conditional draft pick. Maybe I don't know what you could get at this, or something like that. I don't know what you could get at this point because he just clearly is not somebody that has a lot of value. And I think if not, then yeah, you kind of got to wait till June 1st and do that post June 1st release because I don't think you want to eat the extra 16 million on the dead cap, and you kind of have to move something around. I think they will go for a wide receiver in the draft. I think there's some other issues for this team draft wise they're going to target, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I do think a second to third round pick on a wide receiver would make a lot of sense for this team right now. This is a pretty solid wide receiving class coming out. I think you can get some good talent in that draft and kind of bring in some guys that could really be key assets quickly. I think you want to add some speed, want to add some guys that could be a deep ball threat, certainly for this team. I like the pieces they have right now. I think Jennings has certainly shown that he can be a key wide receiver. He had a really solid season. Kittle, obviously, you're going to get out of him. Bourne was really coming around in the second half of the season, and he ended up getting 53 targets and 37 receptions when it was all said and done, Kendrick Bourne. So he's a guy that they really sort of continue to like. They took some flyers, some guys that haven't worked out, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez Scanting. Like, these are some guys that they are taking chances on that just haven't quite worked out for them so far this season. I know Scanting was a little banged up, but like Sky Moore, he was a guy that they're hoping could be really solid for them, and they took a flyer on him. He did not work out so far. So I'm curious to see what type of players they go after in the draft. I certainly expect them to take a wide receiver in the top 3 rounds at this moment in time. Just curious what type of player they're kind of chase after here. I think they could really use some speed.
I definitely think there's a handful of teams that could be in the market for him. When it comes to a trade, that's if he wants to play football. And I'm really just not clear on that at the moment. But I think the Titans, they have a lot of cap space available. The Raiders, and I think Washington will make a lot of sense for his services. So I think they could definitely make a trade for, like you said, maybe a conditional or a day 3 selection. But Nick, again, I do not know if he wants to play football, and it just does not seem like that he wants to, quite frankly. So this is just something they're going to have to probably eat and just face the consequences and get no type of value in return.
Yeah, I think a more interesting name that you listed there would have been Washington. I think that's the team that I'm kind of circling and saying to myself, if there's a logical landing spot for Ayuk, it would be the Commanders right now. Young quarterback in Daniels, who's obviously fighting through some of his own injury things, and they have some solid pieces at wide receiver, but they were also relying on some guys that just really weren't that good in previous stops and really trying to get the most out of them. So I think if this is a wide receiver room you look at in Washington, and they certainly want to be getting themselves in in that position to contend. I think the NFC East is not as strong as many other divisions. I don't think the Cowboys are that strong. The Giants are obviously going through their growing pains, and then I think the Eagles have some issues that they got to sort out. So that division could certainly be wide open. And if you land a guy like Ayuk in DC, I think it could really work out well for the Commanders and could give Jaden Daniels a weapon. If it's going to only cost you a conditional pick or like a seventh round pick, I think if you're the Commanders, you kind of got to take a chance on it. That's the one that I'm circling out of the three you listed that makes the most sense potentially for Ayuk, and I think that could really benefit the Niners to kind of get out of this and get something out of it in the end.
Now, looking at the final topic here, I think the 49ers should heavily invest in this pass rush. Now, getting Joey Bosa back, sorry, Nick Bosa, that is, and then Mykel Williams from injury could definitely maybe downplay this, but this is a team that really struggled with their pass rush last year. Again, injuries played a lot into that, but I definitely think they could benefit by going out there and upgrading this unit. You look at Trey Hendrickson. What's the fit going to be for him? He's by far the top free agent available in this upcoming cycle. This is a guy that's going to get paid a lot of money. And Mykel Williams is still a young guy. He's still going to have 3-4 years left on his rookie deal. Bring in Trey Hendrickson, 3 year, $90 million, should get the job done. He just screams a 49ers type pass rusher. This is a player who's had 3 seasons in his career of 18 plus sacks, 94 total sacks since entering the league in 2017. Only played a couple games this past year due to injury himself. But Nick, this would significantly add spice to this pass rush. This is a team right now that has about $34 million in cap. Of course, Ayuk's going to eat into that a lot, but I think they can do some things to free up some money and bring in a guy like Trent Hendrickson, Trey, that is. He's a stud. He's a stud, Nick. This guy is one of the more underrated players in the entire NFL. Has been for a long time. And if you could pair him up with the floor that you have with some of these other guys like Williams, you could definitely instantly see big time results in this pass rush that again really struggled last year.
I think this would be a great move, right? Hendrickson obviously is having a tough time negotiating deals with the Bengals. They're in a tough contract situation themselves, and maybe we'll dive into that and do an episode of that later in the next couple of weeks here. But that's a team that's really in some tough spots, and Hendrickson, it's clear that there isn't going to be some sort of long-term extension between the two parties in Cincinnati. I think he's looking for a way out to get to a spot where he can contend and be a key contributor for a team. I think that would be good value if you could sign him to that 3 year, $90 million deal. He's a guy that's clearly a homer, a guy that gets in the backfield and causes a lot of problems. 17 and a half sacks in 24 and 23, was really strong in that regard. He had 14 in 2021 as well. This is a guy that's got 81 career sacks. I mean, you're just not going to find that type of production in a lot of places here. I think he's a key weapon. During their Super Bowl run, he had 3 sacks that playoff. So he is clearly an asset that can be really solid for this team. He was a first team All-Pro in 2024. So this is a guy that could really be good. And it's very clear that the negotiations, again, are continuing to not really progress in Cincinnati. So I think he's looking for a new home. And I think you could, move something, give something up here if you're the 49ers to make something happen. This could be a big, a target for them, potentially a guy that you can get an asset there who could really put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, could really be solid and versatile coming off the edge. I know they have Bosa. I know they have some other pieces, but I think they need to add some depth here. And bringing in a guy like that, you can't say no to that if you have the opportunity to do so. He is just a walking sack machine, and he would be a really good add for any defense, let alone, the 49ers that could certainly use that help.
And if you don't want to spend up and make a big splash, Arden Key, I think, from the Titans. This is a guy who's always been a respectable pass rusher in this league, has played for a handful of different teams, was actually here in San Francisco back in 2021, had his best career year with 8 sacks, 35 since he entered the league in 2018. So this is a guy who's always been vastly consistent as a pass rusher. Has always been a respectable run defender as well. I think he's a player who could get at a relatively cheaper price tag. It's not a guy who's been signed ever to a long-term contract other than that 3 year deal he's coming off with Tennessee. So this is a player who's been around the league a little bit, but he's one that's always been adding value to a defense and whatever role they need him in, to step up as a starter when other guys are hurt or just be that depth rotational piece that you alluded to, Nick. I think Arden Key would make a lot of sense. I'm eyeing a $26 million deal over 2 years.
I think he would be a really solid depth piece. This is a guy that's been around the organization. He has some experience with this organization, which I think is really solid when you look at that. And he's a very versatile player. I think you can move him and play him in a different couple of different situations. He had that 1 year stint in 2021. He's certainly getting better as time progresses. I think he's a guy that could be really solid. You saw him, get 6.5 sacks this past season, 6 sacks the year before that. With the Tennessee Titans, he had 6.5 sacks during that lone stint with the 49ers. So he's a player that I think could be really solid He's very versatile. You can play him in a couple different roles. He has that versatility to move him around, play him on the edge, play him at linebacker. You can do a lot with him. I think he is a very versatile prospect. The speed on him is really solid. I think he's a guy that could be really good overall as a good depth piece, right? This is a an interesting move that would be not super expensive at 26 million on 2 years. So I think this is someone you can get for decent value, be a good depth piece, and could add a lot of pressure that could help out your defensive line. And again, like versatile, help your defense, help your front unit out in many different ways.
Now, if you don't want to go to free agency for the pass rush, maybe you turn to the draft. Into the first round, there's a couple targets here that I like. TJ Parker from Clemson. Now, this isn't the fastest guy, doesn't have great twitch or quickness for the position, but he's a player who's incredibly strong, especially at the point of attack. Thicker built guy with some nice arm length. I think the physicality really stands out with him, especially when he matches it with his hands. Always seem to be in phase. Smooth change of direction. He's a pretty nice moving guy for his size. I think from Clemson at times he definitely disappointed. But TJ Parker has a tremendous amount of upside. Maybe not as much as R. Mason Thomas, though. This is a guy I love coming into the year, battled some injuries, so wasn't always able to showcase his full repertoire. This is a guy who's got great fluidness. I love the speed off the ball. He just jumps that snap incredibly well. He can really bend, plays low to the ground, just overall a fast player. He also has violent, heavy hands in the run game. Match that with his pass rushing upside, Nick. R. Mason Thomas can play 10 years in this league. I think whoever gets him is going to be very happy to have this player from Oklahoma. Maybe that home for him is in San Francisco.
That would certainly be interesting, right? R. Mason Thomas is a guy that I'm really high on coming into the draft. I think he's certainly a first round prospect at this moment in time. He's a very talented player, first team All SEC in 2025, second team All SEC in 2024. He was really solid. He was able to get a lot of sacks. He was able to create a lot of pressure off the edge. He certainly put some of those better tackles in the SEC in a blender, was able to put a ton of pressure on them. And, 6'2, 250, I think the speed and the size is certainly really strong with him. Parker's a guy that's got high upside as well. If you can get Parker, or maybe late first round, early second round, he would be a really solid prospect. He had 19 and a half TFLs in 2024, had a bit of a down year in 2025, but at 6'3", 265, he's still got a lot left to develop and really be a key asset here. And I think the 49ers, the first 3 rounds, I think it would make a lot of sense for them to go with a pass rusher, a wide receiver, and then one of the combination of the two, potentially some other position in a combination in the later rounds there. I think maybe try and get somebody who can play running back, maybe try and get an offensive tackle in the third round. But I think they could really work on getting a pass rusher and a wide receiver in their first 2 rounds for this team. And that could really kind of jumpstart this and get themselves in a good spot here. I think TJ Parker or Mason Thomas would be a huge impact for this team early on. I think it's worth spending a first round draft potentially on one of these two guys who are really talented, have a lot of speed. They both have great high football IQ and could be big impacts coming off the edge quickly.
That's me a phrase episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.